Hi, I'm Richard, and this is Mary, and we're going to be looking into kind of the suffering that all of us fall into, um, particularly considering our current circumstances.
And how our suffering can become an obstacle to whatever it is we're defining as yoga, not simply the asana practice, but the obstacles that suffering creates, or perhaps it is some of the obstacles that arise that bring suffering into the life that we are leading. And so we're going to look at how these topics are discussed in the Yoga Sutra, and then try to address how they are impacting us in these current circumstances as well. And then possibly how to deal with obstacles that arise.
Okay. So we're going to be looking at the first pada, or the first chapter of the Yoga Sutra, starting with verse 30. And this is listing those things that cause distraction of the mind. And the verse is very simple. Well, it's actually very complicated. I apologize for that. It's listing those things that cause distraction of the mind, which are the obstacles. And it starts with vyati, is the first one. The next is sthana. The next, samshaya. Pramadha, alasya, avirati, bhranti darshana, alabdha bhumikatva, anavastitatvani. And so those are the obstacles, and they cause what we would call chitta vikshepa, or the moving around of the chitta. So, as Yoga Sutra is saying, we're trying to get the mind, or the chitta, to manifest its true nature in a state of what we call nirodha, or pausing, suspension. And so the first one, probably most of us have experienced some of this. It's called vyati, which means sickness, poor health. And this can be sickness that arises from an accident. It could be, or something that is simply an imbalance in the makeup of the body. It could be an injury, it could be a cold, it could be a chronic disease, but it throws the body off so that rather than experiencing easily in yoga the body as being almost radiant and perfectly balanced, which we've read is occasionally possible in yoga, one starts to experience, the body is like out of whack. And so it starts to produce sensations that are probably reminiscent of deeper memories. And so one can, if one is experiencing sickness, oftentimes something, an anxiety will come, or a fear. And it's like stirring up the deeper memory of the body. And who knows how, so this stuff comes up. And then, what comes from that initial problem, that obstacle, is called sthana. And this is translated in many ways, but the way to translate it that I like is rigidity. One is basically either afraid or angry or doesn't know what to do, and so their whole world is being challenged from inside and outside, and so they become rigid, which means, which is a symptom of fear. And this rigidity might appear in the form of, a suppressed anger or a need to cling on and to get the correct thing as a solution to the problem. So I look at rigidity as also, say, religious fundamentalism is rigidity or fanaticism, or just like a kind of self-assuredness that is based in a deeper lack of assuredness.
And it's also in part the inability to think creatively and to feel safe enough because of whatever obstacle is presenting itself, to feel safe enough to not lock into a state of certainty, of having either a stuckness type of feeling or a point of view that is actually not necessarily good or bad, but that is possibly not relevant to whatever's arising as things evolve in any given moment. And so that in that way it becomes stuck, and it's in a way kind of related to a feeling of depression that can come from it, or a feeling of denial of interaction with what is actually going on within yourself, as well as within those around you or your current circumstances. And so this rigidity is something that is really gets in the way of what we would call yoga, which is this joining together of prana and apana and sensation and movement and mind with the current circumstance. And in the situation that we're all in, with lockdowns all over the world, with confinement that's been going on for even months for many people, at least 1 month for most people on Earth, there is this need to kind of solidify, and that then becomes an obstacle to happiness and to kindness and to the practices of yoga.
So we all kind of initially default back to state of survival. It's a survival reaction, I think, is that rigidity. And then the next of these obstacles is called samshaya, which is usually to be translated as doubt. And of course, what do they mean by doubt? It doesn't mean just to be skeptical, but doubt is a deeper thing, which is the opposite of shraddha, which we've talked about before, which is this feeling of total trust, but total trust not in a dogma or trust in a particular thing, but a much deeper kind of, I don't even want to say intuitive experience of the essential nature of everything. And so shraddha is that sense of a deeper intuition of love. With shraddha one can experience, or one can go into a state of actually not knowing and not being able to formulate what is true, but having this deep, immediate sense of it.
And when you can't access that feeling of shraddha within your own experience, and that feeling really is something that is a deep connection to the core of the body, through which you feel the interconnectedness with others, through which you feel the power of relationship being at the root of safety. When you can't feel that, this kind of doubt that arises is not just questioning, which questioning is good, but it is fearful sort of skepticism and disbelief of things without...
It's deeper than an intellectual doubt. It's something deepen the embodiment of sensation, and quite fearful, quite distracting also, because it's like an anxiety.
And also, like the previous obstacle we were just talking about, it is something that perpetuates a sense of separateness, of small self, of you versus the world or versus the other. That, so you either become stuck or you become doubtful or fearful. And a key element that you start noticing in our day-to-day lives when we're in this strange situation of being in suspension, being in lockdown, is the tendency to grasp hold of these. They're almost like Richard was saying, they're survival instincts in a way. And once you hold on to them too tightly, then you become separate and you forget that the real thing that is going to get you through this is interaction with others, communication with others, and connecting heart to heart, listening deeply.
And so, with that, the next obstacle, which I've experienced about 3 times today, is called pramada, or you become careless or sloppy. In other words, because you're really distracted, you have a task at hand you want to pay attention to, but there's all these parts of you that are more worried about that and that task, and so you become incompetent or sloppy in your actions. And then another related one is called alasya, which means you simply fall back into slothfulness, or you just want to have 6 more drinks and just forget the whole thing and just zone out. And then a reaction to that is not really a cure, but you become what's called avirati, which is one of these. And rati, of course, we always associate with, it's related to the word erotic. And so avirati is you become tuned into sensuality, as if these sense objects were the goal. Okay. And so then that turns out to be, a greater, through the feedback of the body, it recedes the problems much more. So it's not against the enjoyment of pleasure, but avirati means overdoing it, and you are taking something in the mind that I need that, I want that, and it becomes lust and then anger, and then it becomes quite hellish. And so that is considered one of the obstacles in this sequence.
And would you say that if that's occurring, it could be almost like an attachment to something that might be a good thing, like your yoga practice or your freedom to be able to go outside, or so that so that could also be part of the obstacle, is that sort of attachment.
And it's not that
desire.
What you're being attached to is necessarily in and of itself a good or bad thing. If in certain contexts it could be absolutely wonderful, but in other contexts absolutely not wonderful. And so the next one is called Bhranti Darshan. And so darshan is generally considered to be a viewpoint, often referring to a whole school of philosophy. And Bhranti means bad or mistaken. And so, and human beings are really good at creating kind of ad hoc metaphysical theories, or sometimes, what do they call these? Conspiracy theories, which often are metaphysical, because what people do, and always talk about that is human beings are religious by nature in that they love to make philosophies that, you know, which is natural. But if they make a mistake in it, that means that the ego somehow is co-opting it. And even if the words are good, the overall philosophy can be mistaken. And so all kinds of theories, even if they're pretty good theories, if they're enshrined with some kind of religious fever that is inappropriate, they become a huge obstacle. So you can take a great philosophical tradition, and if you put it on an altar, then you'll cease to understand it or live it, and it becomes a huge obstacle. And I think it kind of signifies what a human being is Bhakti-darshan. And then...
And so the obstacles, also, we're talking about them in context of the Yoga Sutra, which is relaying them as to these are obstacles to doing yoga. And in the current circumstances, what does yoga mean? What is it when we're doing our yoga? Is it that we ignore everything that's arising in our household so that we can get our yoga asana practice or our pranayama practice or our chanting practice or whatever in that day so that we are strong and we have it together? Is that what it means that these obstacles come in? Or is it something more than that in everyday life, as yoga is a reflection of everyday life rather than a practice? The practices prepare us for everyday life, but in this sort of crisis situation the world is in, how does this apply? How do these apply to everyday circumstances that we face today?
Oh,
And I have some thoughts, but yeah.
These are deep questions. If we think about it through whatever lens, our circumstance, and then we become either grasping towards it or angry at it, and so we'll think, oh, we're all going to die anyway, so what's the problem? Might as well cleanse the planet of this human species. And that's done with often a sense, because there's always the ego looking, and that's done with a sense of dismissal. Or the body is sick, but it's impermanent, and I'm not the body, ha ha ha. Or your body is sick, it's impermanent, and you're not, so what's your problem? And there's always that sense of, which is somewhere deep in the, what we call the unconscious or something, the ego function is like trying to get on top. And that's always the thing. So even if you're, you feel this sense of, when anger arises, you know it, generally, if you're paying, or when, and yoga is basically like really watching and inquiring, because you can have excellent yoga and not have the time or the correct circumstances to practice what we call classical yoga, where you're going to sit, on kusha straw with a deer skin in a hermitage somewhere in the mountains. But you can do excellent yoga, while you're on the field of having to do, feed your family or make peace or to apologize to someone or to help them out. And then in the gap, so we always have to go back and look again. And so these final obstacles is you fail to alabdha bhumikatva, meaning that you do not attain a bhumi. And so a bhumi, probably related to the boom, but it means a land or almost an existence level. I've achieved this, and it's like a large pasture of like, I've achieved one of the states, and you can kind of rest, and in these states, then you can really start to focus and practice and start to appreciate things. And so the inability to actually get to any of those states is considered one of the obstacles. And then one is then unstable, and so you can't quite get the mind to focus. And even in doing what we consider ordinary or daily things, you've got to focus your mind. And it's a huge, sometimes it's hard. And so those are the classical.
And often when we run into the obstacles, because they have by nature sort of end up making us feel separate and alone and sort of stuck within our own ideals, etc., all the things we've talked about, it's often very, very hard to see them as the obstacle, but then to see the outcome is when we realize these things might be happening, that there might actually be obstacles to us interacting in genuine, truthful, kind, stable ways with others and with our circumstances. So that the yoga in the yoga practice room is one thing, where we practice the techniques that allow us to become steady and stable and get the embodied sense of feeling stability of mind, feeling the pattern of breath, feeling the sense of being grounded. Those are the practices that then when we step off of the mat and into the real world, which for many of us is, from the kitchen to the dining room in our house that we've been confined to these days. If you're fortunate, that we may not notice the obstacle, but we notice the residual impact, the sorrow or the anger or the distraction that we find ourselves being in much of the time. And what we have run into from students who've been in touch with us and friends who've been in touch with us in the last month or so is that there is this sense right now of real confusion on some level with the arising of some of these states, like distraction and the desire to keep the mind distracted, unconscious desire usually, so that we don't have to drop in to really face what's going on right in front of us. Mm-hmm. And the obstacle that would be causing us to feel this distraction could be any one of these, that we've talked about, from sickness to sort of laziness to that where we don't want to really see or cannot physically really engage with what's going on. And the engagement with life, the two-way street of interacting with the other is really what the yoga is about. Not so much whether or not you get your leg behind your head, which is kind of entertaining for a few years.
Until you can't do it anymore.
Until you can't do it anymore.
Yeah. So the next verse is, and so now that we're familiar with these obstacles, and the obstacles are really like a great gift in a strange sense, in that you all of a sudden start to perhaps get closer to what really is important in life, or the impermanence of life and the preciousness of it. And we often will coast on and on with our particular yoga practice or our particular sectarian beliefs and assumptions, avoiding the deeper question of time, of impermanence. And so the result of these things is dukkha, umanasyangam ejajyatva shvasa vikshepa sahabhuvaha. So they're accompanied by dukkha, which means suffering is a good way to translate dukkha, but not suffering necessarily physically, because they'll consider like any state where you're not feeling this deep sense of affection for all beings. That's considered dukkha by someone who's, it's a non-yogic state. And most people consider dukkha just to be, like a headache or something. And then dormanasya is a darkness of the mind. It's like depression, and then which is circling around, and then the limbs start trembling. And so what's meant by that is, and so your body, which is it's your vehicle. It actually gets out of balance from all of these obstacles, because the obstacles they manifest mentally, and all mental manifestation is a manifestation of movements of the prana deep in what we've said is the flesh of the body, the history of the body. And so all of the obstacles have that undercurrent or that root in the prana patterns throughout the entire body. And so, strange events. So they'll say the limbs start to tremble, meaning your yoga asana isn't coming out. And then shvasa means inhaling and exhaling are vikshepa, are disturbed. So all of these things are disturbed. And so your smooth, delightful inhale, followed by the smooth exhale, that's all disturbed. And that's... Now, if this occurs, what is the practice? To get upset? Oh, my yoga is ruined. Oh, poor me. No. The practice is notice that. Because the deeper yoga practice is not the smoothness of the breath, but is something much, much deeper and more interesting. Then, to deal with them, verse 32, tat pratisiddhartham ekatattva yasaha. So by ekatattva, so tat means that, pretty much. And a very general term, but you know what we mean, that. Tattva means thatness. And so it's a very, very open way of referring to so a tattva is considered to be almost like a field of specific interrelated occurrences. So it could be mental occurrences, physical occurrences. And so if you can get the mind to go into one tattva, then that is a way of calming these distractions.
And once you calm the distractions, then it's not as though you are fighting the obstacles. It's that the obstacles, which really are rooted in instability of mind that results in instability of emotion, often in fear or anger or negative emotion. And so the key one, the first thing that we can take an active step in doing is focusing the mind on one field. And what do we mean? I mean, Richard, you're saying that that's any particular field, but it could be, the breath, but then can it be zeroed in a bit more on the breath, or it could be sensation, or
Yeah, it could be sensation,
in?
particular sensation patterns. It could be sound, it could be visual patterns, touch patterns, sensation. So all of these are tattvas, and within the tattva, the mind is still free to check it out. And so, there's the classic Zen saying, if you want to control a cow, give it a large pasture. And so the mind is like, it loves grazing and just chewing on grass. And so you just give it a huge pasture and there's no problem.
Yeah, where we live in Colorado, there are lots of cows and there are fields with fences on the edge, and so often, they have these huge fields and maybe 10 cows or 10 horses. And particularly the cows, as you walk by or drive by these fields, the cows are in the field with their necks
stretching through the fence to get the grass
on the other side. And they have a whole huge field behind them. And that's what we do with our own circumstances and our own minds, is we have this playground of something that we could have as a tattva. And instead of seeing what we have, we're looking just beyond it at something else. And so very often it is just to turn a quarter turn and look at what you are experiencing in the here and now, and then not making it terribly serious either, but just really taking an instant to focus, say, at the beauty of this flower, or the joy that you see in someone else's face, just for an instant. And that is enough to switch the mind into a field of spaciousness, away from a field of, well, I want something on the other side of the fence.
Yeah. And so you can expand the field always.
Yes.
I think that's part of the art. So then, now that we're starting to concentrate the mind, there's a very famous verse, verse 33, which is probably the most potent remover of general obstacles. And everyone should know this verse, you should memorize it, you should chant it all day and all night, as you attend to all your other duties. Maitri Karuna Mudita Pekshanam Sukha Dukkha Punya Punya Vishayanam Bhavanatas Chitta Prasadanam. This is referring basically to our relationship to other beings, including ourselves, because sometimes you can be mean to yourself. Oh, I want to be nice to everybody, but I'm not nice, so I'm going to be mean to myself and punish myself by doing this or doing that. But Maitri just means friendliness, literally, kindness. And so you practice kindness, and then karuna is compassion. So whenever you come across happiness, genuine, simple happiness, you feel, with it, and it could be within yourself, but more likely within other beings. And then you feel friendliness. And then if there's sadness or suffering, you experience compassion. And that's extremely powerful. And the effect on your own body of practicing that is completely profound. It's almost your own little problems are there, but when you really get into the problem of relationships with others, how you view other beings, that's when it becomes a much more powerful thing for your own happiness. And so these are called there are many names for them. In Buddhism, they're called the Brahmaviharas. And we're going to...
Yeah, we thought we would talk about them as a separate talk, maybe next week, because they are such a powerful and important part of the teachings.
Maitri practice.
Yeah, Maitri practice.
Yeah.
And then once you have thought about those in respect to obstacles and the arising of obstacles.
Yeah, the Yoga Sutra does something. We're just going to, a couple more verses. They use the word va, which means or. So it's an extremely open text, and do this, or do that, or do that, or do that. And so it's a brilliant text in that basically it is drawing connections between all these different schools of yoga.
And
you don't call them yoga.
And it's encouraging us to take action rather than to be passive.
Yeah.
So it's encouraging action, but it's not demanding a doctrine that is too rigid.
Okay. And so, the next verse, Pracharadana Udaranantyam Va Pranasya. So, or you can exhale and pause. Okay, this is just like the beginning level of pranayama, and do that with the breath.
And you can do an actual pranayama practice in that regard, but another way to use this in times like this, where there is a lot of anxiety that arises. Say you're in a conversation with someone and it's getting a little bit overheated, or you're getting unstable. If you bring the awareness to the breath and just notice that you're inhaling, notice that you're exhaling, and at the end of the exhale, take a very small pause, like 2 seconds, and then inhale, exhale, pause. It is a method for getting you back in the body. It's also a thing that is amazing in terms of helping with anxiety, so that if you're feeling anxious, and they don't have to be big long breaths or even inhale, exhales, but just the idea that you can quiet the mind through the tool of the breath is amazing. And by quieting the mind slightly, then the emotions and things like anxiety start to settle. So inhale, exhale, pause. Inhale, exhale, pause 5 times. And you don't make a big deal out of it if you're in a situation with another person, but just do it, try it, see if it works for you. It's something that a lot of people find very, very helpful.
Yeah. But just one note, when you exhale, or deep exhale, don't close your heart, because you can get a different effect. So sometimes people, I'll exhale and pause, but I exhale in the most demonic way possible. And basically then I hold that just as a method of trying to disprove any usefulness to the Yoga Sutra. And then you're kind of stamping into the system your worst feelings and your, the physical feelings that embody when I really want to just like eliminate all other sentient beings and eat them for dinner, breakfast or something. Which I won't do.
Okay.
But you exhale as if you were a yoga practice, in which you keep the best of the inhale, and then pause. And then again, you let the breath start up again. And the result of that is verse 35, what happens then is then you're able to observe very precisely the arising and falling of sensation patterns. Or patterns in prana. Prana is basically sensation. Often touch, but it could be auditory or visual or even flavor, smell. But any sensation, it appears and then it fades away. And that's true in any of the fields of the sense. And when you hold the breath out, but briefly, all of a sudden you notice that everything arises and falls. And we're back to some very, actually advanced, but fundamental yoga practice in doing that.
And when you can notice that pattern of things arising, manifesting, and then falling, which is what life is about, and what all of our experiences are, then the nervous system starts to get calmed down automatically. You don't have to do anything to make that happen, because there's this sense of almost like you're out in a very, calm sea, just floating, and you notice that there are wave patterns, and you happen to be riding the waves of life, rather than fighting and trying to create stability. The stability is actually already there. And so the obstacles arise when we're trying to create stability within a situation that is in flux. And in fact, if we can release into the unknown of that situation with a sense of trust, then the stability that is already there is far deeper and far more secure and far more sustainable.
Because then the sensations that we would normally associate with a problem, even though it's just a sensation pattern, it's not going to last. Or if it's and so it's just the ability to see the interconnectedness of the wave-like patterns. And
when you first start doing that, when you're applying it from Yoga Sutra to your own life these days, you may not have the immediate experience of noticing that pattern as it's happening. It may be that you look back and you say, oh yeah, I saw that these things came and went, and 20 minutes ago I was really upset. And what happened? I'm not anymore. Or 20 minutes ago I was in a bliss state, and what happened? I'm not anymore. And then you start realizing these two are part of that pattern, and then they stop being such obstacles to relationship, to the sense of kindness and caring for yourself and for others, which at this point are really what is most important for us all, everywhere. There's this feeling of supporting one another, of being generous, being grateful for what we have.
Sometimes when I, just in my imagination, think about people helping each other, communicating, cross-culturally or even across the alleyway. It's just like, it feels so wonderful. And so the Yoga Sutra then said, or when you experience thoughts that are luminous and free of sorrow. And so you're actually using that, what would I say, optimistic state of mind as a tattva, as a field in which I'm going to let the mind go. And in that, then you start to get grounded. And so that's another And basically the answer is, what if that works? Do it.
And the real key is this idea of sensation pattern following the direction of mind. In other words, if you think of a luminous state of being, or the next one of a person who is
A
a
luminous
luminous person, and you think of them, and then you notice what it is you're experiencing, which if you're really truly observing that memory or that image of that space or that state or that other being, what you notice is a resonance with that experience and a feeling within you where the small self we talked about, where the ego has taken over and made you separate and afraid and fearful or angry, where that's starting to soften, and this feeling of connectedness is there. So it's this process of both of those, direction of mind, and then remembering to feel into the embodied experience how good it feels to feel connected, and to let go of the chains of obstacles that keep us kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many ways that might manifest, that initial.
And one of the things I've been reading recently with Kongtrul Rinpoche, who's an amazing author and teacher, wonderful, wonderful man, and beautiful writer. But one of the things he brings up in his teachings is to remember that those feelings of connectedness, the feeling deep in the core of the heart, that really is the essence of who we are beyond ourselves as connected beings, and to think what is at stake if you don't cultivate that feeling within yourself. What is at stake for you? Because it's a feeling, when you feel that sense of interconnectedness, it's a wonderful feeling. And so you will be less happy if you don't feel it. But also what's at stake if you don't feel that is that connectedness is not then shared with others through your presence. Because once you feel that way, you then behave in different ways, in a different way towards others when you interact with them, because you're feeling love, you're feeling connectedness, you're feeling something bigger than your own illusions of who you are. And so when you're not feeling that, others don't feel as good as they might either. And so what's at stake is a lot. And in this situation, where we are in our house all by ourselves, what's at stake if we get separated from something bigger than ourselves is our mutual happiness. And then the happiness that we might be able to just leave little bits of in the world where we happen to be. So it's a good thing to remember when you think, well, this is all just sort of garbage, what does it really have to do with what's going on with me today? To realize it has a lot to do with it. And these obstacles are natural, they arise, and we've done these yoga practices so that we can figure out ways to let them dissolve and be part of the wave pattern rather than stuck symbols of our situation.
So thank you.
So next time we will talk about the Brahma Viharas, and thank you for joining us.
So Brahma Viharas, verse 33. first pada of Yoga Sutra. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.